The United States Constitution was originally enacted in an effort to reaffirm the idea of limited government. However, in recent times, we have seen great government overreach, particularly with government bodies and agencies being weaponized to target certain individuals and groups.
You know, we are living in a time of incredible governmental overreach. Our founding fathers fought the war for independence against the mightiest army on the face of the earth at the time with very rudimentary arms and equipment and training. But they did so because there was a philosophy being perpetrated across Europe called the divine right of kings. Whatever the king said was right, no matter how it affected other people. Our founders shed their blood to end that unlawful and ungodly overreach of government. Here we are, fast forward 200 plus years later, and now we have the divine right of governors and mayors.
One way the government has been weaponized is through the Justice Department and other various government agencies.
I don't know what's happened to the FBI. I come from a family of law enforcement, Irish Catholic, New York. A lot of us been involved in the FBI and as cops and whatnot. I have a lot of respect for the average men and women who are in the FBI. I've lost respect for the elite at the top because they become politically corrupt. And now we have this situation here where I don't know if I can trust them on much of anything.
This becomes very apparent when you compare the fate of the BLM rioters in 2020 versus the January 6th protesters in 2021.
When you think about January the 6th, which was a horrible thing, it was happening live during my radio program, and I was one of the most vocal people condemning that. That's not who we are as Christians. That's not who we are as conservatives. At the same time, people seem to forget that there were mass riots. They were literally burning down chunks of Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day. There was also a time when Black Lives Matter and Antifa tried to storm the White House. 60 Secret Service agents were injured in that attack. They tried to burn down St. John's Church, the Church of the Presidents in Lafayette Square. You don't hear anything about that, do you?
Prosecutors have now charged more than 1,000 people in relation to the January 6th riots. In comparison, the vast majority of citations and charges against George Floyd protesters were ultimately dropped or dismissed. According to a Guardian analysis of law enforcement records, in a dozen jurisdictions examined, at least 90% of cases were dropped or dismissed. In some cities like Dallas and Philadelphia, as many as 95% of citations were dropped or not prosecuted.
You have the FBI weaponized to take down Trump supporters. Now, this is ultimately not about criminal activity. This is about intimidation factor. They want Trump supporters to know that if they are vocally supportive of the president, if they believe that there was a stolen election, that they too could get a knock at the door at 2 o'clock in the morning, or they could be surrounded by agents in the drive-thru of a Hardee's restaurant.
Another area we are seeing a vast discrepancy in prosecutions is with the issue of life. According to CatholicVote.org, there have been more than 300 attacks on churches and pregnancy resource centers since May of 2020, with minimal prosecutions. However, protesters outside of abortion clinics are being charged at a high rate.
The discrepancy between all the prosecutions of pro-life individuals who are almost entirely just standing there voicing their opposition to the horrific killing of infants in the womb, and the paltry, 4 people getting charged after hundreds and hundreds of attacks, fire bombings, and spray paintings and the smashing of glass and windows. Like, these are real violent attacks. And sure, thank God it doesn't seem like anybody has been killed in these attacks, but they are violent and they should be prosecuted. And the discrepancy is appalling.
Watch as Senator Mike Lee questions Attorney General Merrick Garland over these discrepancies.
DOJ has announced charges against 34 individuals for blocking access to or vandalizing abortion clinics. And there have been over 81 reported attacks on pregnancy centers, 130 attacks on Catholic churches since the leak of the Dobbs decision, and only 2 individuals have been charged. So how do you explain this disparity?
We apply the law equally. I will say you're quite right. There are many more prosecutions with respect to the blocking of the abortion centers, but that is generally because those actions are taken with photography at the time, during the daylight, and seeing the person who did it is quite easy. Those who are attacking the pregnancy resources centers, which is a horrid thing to do, are doing this at night in the dark.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, government agencies targeted churches across the nation, hitting them with massive fines if they stayed open. Meanwhile, restaurants, clubs, and bars were to remain open in many places.
The most egregious action that I have witnessed in the last 10 years has been the act of governors and mayors and government officials all up and down the line who have determined what's essential in the life of a believer and what is not. You can go to Lowe's and buy goods in great mass, but you can't go to church. Church is not essential. Lowe's is essential. A liquor store is essential. It's an essential business, but the business of the church is not essential. The fact that government officials have usurped that kind of authority over the church is indicting to us as believers.
The government has also been involved in censorship efforts across social media. The recent revelations that the FBI colluded with Twitter to suppress political speech by blacklisting and shadow banning is shocking, but sadly, not surprising.
The FBI was apparently working with Facebook. Facebook was sending the FBI private messages from Facebook users who might have been questioning the outcome of the presidential election. This is not just heinous. I believe this to be a crime as well, and that has to be investigated. It's troubling that we live in a time when a disagreement or a difference of opinion could somehow become a matter of criminal investigation by the feds.
Anyone that puts forth an opinion or data that's contrary to what comes down through the channels that are sending out these messages, they can find themselves shut down, deplatformed, and not able to reach the American people. And I would say that we're living through a period in history where the American people are not able to get the information that they need to make intelligent decisions for themselves and their families.
In the run-up to the 2020 election, a bombshell report of the Hunter Biden laptop, which had seemingly incriminating evidence of corruption on it, was leaked. However, government agencies took swift action to delegitimize any reports about the laptop.
If you contrast how Twitter quickly shut down the New York Post and their story on Hunter Biden, which was fact-checked and true and totally based on very factual information, versus how they treated the story about President Trump allegedly saying that veterans were losers and scumbags who died for their country stupidly. They didn't shut those stories down, and that was all based off of hearsay. So why did they shut the Hunter Biden story down, which was actually a national security crisis for the potentially incoming president, Joe Biden?
The left has an agenda. They've taken over the big tech companies. They've taken over so many other institutions in our culture that it's really tough to fight back against them. But we can't give up. I remain optimistic. I think that at the end of the day, the American people are with us. And if enough of us rise up and speak out and tell the truth, that we'll be in a better position to win.